team.
Hey there, this is Malorian, and this is the Orc Tactical Team, and I think a lot of people know that I don't really like comp. I'm not really a big fan of it, and so today's topic is really going to be centered around that. It's going to be about cheating comp, the various ways. I mean, there's a lot of different comp styles out there, and each one has its weak points. A spot where, hey, if this is what your comp is, this is how I'm going to get around it. So I guess to really start from the bottom, what if there's no comp? Well, I mean, that's really simple. You make the toughest list you can. Don't hold back anything. Throw in everything that you think is strong. Think about the meta, all the usual things. That's kind of a separate topic. That's how normal Warhammer should be played. But let's now put it up to the next level of comp, where it's really just saying, you know what? You can't use these things. Well, really, the real big pitfall that some people have when they're being told you can't use something is that they start giving up on ideas. Let's say, for example, they say you can't take a demon prince. People will complain. They'll say, yeah, I can't do this, can't do this. And instead of saying, okay, this is my list, cut out this choice, from what remains, what is the best list I can make? And they get so focused on what that model was and what its role was. Or maybe it's an item. Oh man, now that I can't take this item, how could I possibly win? And they're trying to find out what's the best second way to make up for that item. You know, if I can't take a Dispel Scroll, I'm going to add in all these other defensive magical items. Instead of really saying, no, like I said, clear your mind and say, this was not even part of the book. This is not what I'm dealing with. Given these things, what is the next best thing that I can make from this book? And it could be a completely different style. You know, for example, if you're looking at, let's say, for example, the Dark Elves, and they decide, oh, you can't take Warlocks, and you can't take your flying around, you can't even take Dark Pegasus characters whatsoever. Well, okay, you have to kind of really analyze your list again. You don't start trying to think, okay, how can I make a Lord on a horse that's going to do the same thing as Marathi? No, don't try and waste time with that. Look at it and see, like, okay, well, I can still make a really infantry-based list, or maybe a monster-based list, just, you know, best of what you can do with what's there. So that's really the next point. The next one is kind of the comp where they say, take a choice. So instead of saying flat out, you can't take this, they'll say you have A, B, C, or whatever. You can take one or two or whatever their format is. Basically, you don't get the full range of options, but they give you selective options. And so what you really need to do again is take a look at these and look at all the different permutations. So, I mean, if they give you 4 options and you only can take 2, don't automatically look at what you think is the best 2. Really write them down and say, okay, what if I took this and this, this and this, this and this, and set all those out, and then looking at this, again, ignoring that the other ones were ever an option, you know, don't try and compensate. Say, okay, if I had these 2, as you know, because maybe you don't even want those, right? Maybe if I said you get the choice of these 2 items, you don't have to take them. But if you did, what was the best list you could make with those 2 items? Then, once you take all those permutations with your corresponding list, you can then look at those, compare it to the meta, decide which one's going to be strongest, and go from there. And again, it's really just one of those things where the real pitfall that people have from this one is they'll just get really just bogged down with negativity, saying, oh, I can't take 8 Morin Fang. Oh, this is bull. I'm not going to do ogres at all. When meanwhile, they could just do ogres a different way and just focus on a different strategy instead of just pushing up Morin Fang. The next one you kind of see after this, we're really getting into some of the ones after these get a little bit more complicated. There's lots and lots of different minor variations, but I'm going to kind of clump them together. And I think the next one I'm going to really attack that really gives you an option is the one where they say, here are all the things that will count against your army. You can make your army in any way you want, but you're going to be getting a comp score or a comp negative or something like this. Now, the real next step to these is, what do they do with this score? One of the ones that I see quite often is they take your list, you get a comp score, and from that, that's how they get your pairings for the first let's say, sometimes the first pairing, sometimes the first three, but in the end, they still have to really break it out and saying, if we don't want to turn this into multiple different tournaments, we still have to come to a pyramid at the end, and we still need one winner. Well, this is really a big one where a lot of people say, like, wow, if I take the hardest list, I'm going to be up there against all the rest of the hardest lists. So I have to go and I have to take something a lot softer. So I start off against a lot of other softer armies and I'll be a lot better off. Otherwise, wow, I'm going to go against the toughest list and I'm screwed. Well, the best way I can explain how this one actually works out is, let's assume that you're going to go into a tournament and that everybody there is you. They're all exactly the same clone. We're all exactly the same skill level. The only difference is the comp score on our list. Our lists are varying degrees of strength. Well, let's look at first the option where if you went in with that weak list. Let's say it's a 6-game tournament, 3 where you're matched up, 3 where it's now just who's ever kind of winning. Well, in the first one, you're going to be against equal lists, against equal skill, so you have a 50% chance to win. So 50% game 1, 50% game 2, 50% game 3, but then all of a sudden you're going to get to games, 4, 5, 6, and all of a sudden you're equal skill, but their list is a lot stronger. So you can't really put a number to it. I can't say like, oh, it'll be exactly 17.3, but it's going to be clearly less than 50%. Let's go from the other side saying, screw it, I'm not just going to take the strongest list I need to take. Sure, I might have to face the strongest player game 1, but really, if I'm trying to win this thing, that's what I'm trying to do anyway. So again, now let's look at the same thing. I'm playing against someone with equal skill, equal level, but now I'm bringing the strongest list I can. And the way this is going to go is 50, 50, 50, 50, 50, 50. So really, if you look at those percentages going across, your odds are better at actually winning if you take the stronger list going into it. Now, again, I'm going to be attacking this whole topic, assuming you're a competitive player who wants to win. There's a girl right here. I can see her. Now, if you are going into a tournament and your goal is that you want more friendly games, and this is why you like this comp system, because I can take my nice, softy, fluffy list, and I'll be up against other nice, fluffy lists. Well, if that's your goal, then sure, yeah, take your fluffy list and you'll be doing this. Again, I'm trying to show you that if you were trying to win the tournament, what would you actually do? Now, here's another one that sometimes they do whenever you get some sort of comp score. The other one is sometimes that score directly corresponds to the points you get. So sometimes it's something where there's a multiplier at the end. No, don't distract me. Sometimes it's something for every single game, you get extra points, right? Something like this. Well, these ones really come down to the math, and you really have to sit down and crunch how worth it is for every single step. For example, I was just dealing with one of my viewers, and he was saying, well, one of the things that could really bring me down another couple of levels is if I took regular orcs rather than Savage Orc Biggins. And I think the regular orcs would be Biggins as well. But the real question is that I had to put back to him as well, what is this going to gain you? And it's like, well, if I go down to this, I'm probably going to gain like another 100 or 200 points per game. I'm like, oh, that's pretty good, right? 3 points in the bank, cha-ching, because you had this lower, weaker army, let's call it. Here's the real question, though. If you would have had your Savage Orc Biggins instead of the regular Orc Biggins, could they actually earn those points or more back? You almost get to the point, too, where it's not even a thing where, like, it's a gradient. It's almost like it's a step, where if I take this level of strength, I can't beat the opponent army. Like, let's say I'm up against a Gut Star. Well, good for me. I took a weak army. They didn't. I can't beat his army now. I can't get points. So at the end of the game, I end up with my 200 points, and that's it. Whereas opposed to if I actually take that stronger unit, all of a sudden I can actually beat their units. I can gain their points. And this is where you can see this big step change. And you say, damn, like, of course I want to be going to this. I might not be getting the extra 200 points per game, but I'll be getting an extra let's throw a number out there, 1,000 for actually killing things from the other side of the army. So again, I can't say right here the definite for all these, because it's all going to come down to the math, and it really then is up to you to be looking at this math. Another good example of one that I got to go to before is they had a very strong comp system, and there was a multiplier. So no matter what your score was, it would then get multiplied depending on what type of level your army was graded at. And so what I was able to figure out with the math is that if I took the weakest army on there, which was still something where it was still fairly good and I could do okay, even in even in times where I lost to my opponents, and I believe even if they got a massacre, because my comp score was so low and the multiplier was so large, I would end up with more points than the person that massacred me. So I took this, I went to the tournament, I think I only won like half my games, and then I won Best General because of that multiplier. And so really at the end of the tournament, people are angry like, oh, how can he win? He only won like half his games. This is ridiculous. Well, you all had the comp pack. You all had the way to see these. Now, with this, I should say with the next bit here, maybe you don't get to see it. Maybe somebody just says, oh, there'll be comp applied. Make sure you go in and you ask that TO, how is this actually being done? Sometimes they'll say as well, like, oh, these things will come together and will build up your overall score. Ask them for that formula. I want to know if it comes like, is it this many points for my wins? What's the multiplier? What's the percentages? You need those numbers so you can actually make your list. Again, if you're a person going to the tournament just for like, oh, I'm just there to drink and have fun with my buddies, then you don't even care. But for the most part, if you do want to win, you have to look at that math. Now, one of the next ones you can really look at for this is the type of level where a lot of people believe this is actually the strongest one, but you actually go to like a comp council. And what that really is that, first of all, you submit your lists. And first of all, some of the comp councils are almost like ones we talked about before, where they take in your list, say, it's too hard, push it back, and then it's almost like the first one where you just can't take things. Well, really, depending on what their system is, you can almost kind of play around with it a bit. If you know that's what they're doing, you can, and if they don't have really any requirements, there's no list, well, make the strongest list, send it out, they'll send it back. Make it slightly worse, send it out, they'll send it back. Eventually, you can almost get to this attrition thing where if it's just some guy trying to do the grading, eventually he's like, screw it, whatever, I am tired of getting emails from you every day, just bring your stupid list. And you can get through that way. Most of them aren't like that, though. A lot more with the comp council, it'll be a thing where they look at the list and then they grade it. And then, again, it could go into any of these other systems. Maybe it's a thing where you'll be paired up based on that comp, or it'll be something where you get extra points. But either way, instead of it having a set list that's saying, okay, if you take an orc war boss, it's -2 points or whatever. Instead, there are people at the other end. And one of the big things you can actually do is find out who is on that comp council. Again, it's probably your right to ask, hey, TO, tournament organizer, who's actually on the comp council? And, they'll probably say, like, oh, it's this, and this. And then from those people, hopefully, if you're a competitive player, you'll know these different TOs and the people they'll be pulling in to do a comp council. And we'll be able to say, okay, this person, let's say Anthony from the Sustainable Center is on there. If don't play Skaven because he's going to mark you down. Don't take a lot of cannons because he's going to mark you down. That's the type of thing I'm coming in there from. Or what's some of the things that Anthony doesn't really respect? Oh, okay, if he's not going to respect these things, I'm going to try and pull those more elements into my list. For example, maybe there's a lot of people in the council that they just don't respect shooting whatsoever. Like, not War Machines. A lot of these guys, Anthony, he'll tell them all these cannons, they're really things you have to watch out for. But I bet I could sneak in a lot of regular shooting. So I'm going to be basing a list around this. Or maybe, all these guys really don't respect Wood Elves. I'm going to bring in a list that's going to come in, be able to run around circles around people, but at the beginning, knowing these people, none of them respect Wood Elves. None of them have really played against that style of list. I'm just going to go for that, right? And so past that, I think the only other thing you can be looking for, if let's say you don't know the comp council at all, really the way that you want to try and beat the comp council is usually the comp council is basing their ideas off basic net lists. So they know, oh, look, there's the Demon Prince with the 2 Chimeras, there's the double Grey Seer, there's the whatever. And these are things they're really looking out for. Again, maybe that's the time where you need to stop, think outside of the box, and say, you know what, I'm going to go and I'm going to go with this. This is something that most people don't really deal with. Let's say for my part, my Night Goblins. I'm going to go with the Night Goblin list. I'm going to have a bunch of heroes. I'm going to do the double fleas. I'll be able to do all these things, but really people looking at the list might not be seeing that. Or start pulling in those little things where you know from your own experience, man, this really actually is a strong list, but it's not the really top, net list that's out there. Or again, work the system. If it's a thing where they're going to be giving you a grade and you're going to be going in and that's just like your first pairing, we already talked about that. If it's something like that, ignore it. It's just stupid and it's not going to change anything. So you really have to understand how this comp works to actually get past it. So there you go. There's my summary of the different comp styles and the different ways to get past them. Hey, Shira, do you want to have a little last say on this?